Hello everyone, we're Jasmine and Ruby, and today we're going to introduce the inflation and also how to calculate. Inflation is a rate that measures how much more expensive a set of goods and service that has become over a certain period. The average consumer's cost of living has been tracked over time to recognize inflation. Government agencies will conduct household surveys to identify a basket of commonly purchased items and use it to calculate the Consumer Price Index, which is CPI. The basket of goods contain above these 8 categories such as medical care, housing, education, food and beverage. CPI is the most widely used measure of inflation. The weight of CPI identifies change in consumer tendency for different categories and product price. For firms and consumers, CPI can affect their economic decisions, and for a government agency, CPI data determines what kind of economic policy is needed to apply. So how to calculate CPI? CPI is the cost of market basket in given year divided by the cost of market basket in the base year and times 100. And CPI can be used to calculate the inflation rate, which is new CPI minus the prior CPI and divided by prior CPI and times 100. There are two drivers behind this inflation, that is, demand pull and cost push inflation. They can occur either simultaneously or separately. Demand pull inflation occurs when demands of goods or service rises, but the supply cannot keep pace with the economic production capacity, which causes the supply shortage. Demand pull inflation especially happens in a strong economy. An economic boom usually follows by a low unemployment rate, in which consumers tend to earn more income and are willing to spend more. Likewise, low interest rate also prompt households to purchase rather than save it in a bank. And lastly, the government response to the downturn of economy such as fiscal policy may leave excessive amount of money in the market when the economy is recovered. As we mentioned fiscal policy, let's take a brief look at it. In order to create stable economic conditions and maintain price stability during economic growth, policymakers will apply fiscal or monetary policy. And there is a slight difference between these two policies. To begin with fiscal policy, government focus on government expenditure and taxation to maintain the economy.
And now I'm going to talk about fiscal policy. Different types of fiscal policy will be applied according to different situations. Contractionary fiscal policy will be taken during inflation since it aims to increase aggregate demand. The government will reduce government expenditure and increase taxation so that less money will be spent on the market, which also results in the government's budget surplus. In contrast, during an economic downturn, the government will utilize expansionary fiscal policy to stimulate consumption. The expansionary and contractionary monetary policies have almost the same function as fiscal policy.
The difference is that actions are taken by the central bank instead of the government. Monetary policy influences the money supply by adjusting the interest rate. Low interest rates can stimulate consumption, while high interest rate can discourage household and firm spending.
Cost push inflation occurs when the overall production costs increase, mostly due to natural disaster or a rise in raw materials and labor costs. High costs of production thus result in supply shock that disrupt production. However, in the case of cost push inflation, demand remains constant despite the change in production costs. Therefore, the firms will raise the price to compensate for the loss of quantity of supply. You can see from this graph that the short-run aggregate supply will shift to the left when cost-push inflation occurs, leading to a rise in price and a drop in quantity. Since many cost-push factors like rising energy prices and higher tax are temporary, we use short-run aggregate supply to explain this phenomenon. One of the noticeable examples is the surge in ingredient and energy costs due to the Russia-Ukraine war. The war has cut down the supply of crops, energy, and raw materials for construction, which has seriously affected many European household living quality. From the two diagrams below, you can see that the price of oil has escalated for around 15%, and the disrupted supply chain of gas has a significant effect to the European energy resources. The reverse of inflation is what we call as deflation. However, deflation is also undesirable and harmful to the economy. Deflation is the general decline of the price level of goods and services as aggregate supply grows faster than aggregate demand.
Although the purchasing power of currency rises during deflation, economy sees it as a concern of less economic activity and lower economic growth.
Because when prices are falling, consumers tend to anticipate lower prices in the future, and thus delay making purchase if possible. From the graph, you can see that the right shift of aggregate supply has followed by the left shift of aggregate demand due to the consumer's expectation. As a result, deflation has been seen as a sign before recession. Therefore, most economists are now believe that low, stable, and predictable inflation is good for an economy. If inflation is low and predictable, it is easier to recover the average price level by applying contractionary policy to slightly adjust interest rate, taxation, or government expenditure. And this is the end of our video.
Thank you.